What do Elon Musk, Pete Hegseth, and JD Vance have in common? Well, they suck as people. More specifically, they are all bad dads. MAGA loves to lecture us about being parents. So why are they so terrible at it? I have answers. I'm Amanda Marcotte. Welcome to Standing Room Only. What makes someone a good father? Good dads make kids feel safe and loved. They teach kids to care about others. Then there's MAGA. In that world, the worth of a father is about how many kids you have. As we covered in the MAGA baby boom video, this hype for big families is tone deaf. It reduces kids to a commodity. That can lead to toxic or even abusive parenting. But everywhere on the right, it's about quantity over quality.
But I think we could all agree that having more children is not just a good thing, it's a necessary thing.
Look at the Trump team. They are living up to the hype in terms of they're pro-baby, wouldn't you say? Take a look at some of these stats. RFK Jr. with 6 kids. Brooke Rollins, 4 kids. Howard Lutnick, 4 kids. Jamison Greer, 5 kids. This is good.
Wait, where's Sean Duffy?
Sean Duffy, 9 kids.
9 kids. No one beats us.
This is Jack. This is Maria Victoria. We call her Marivi. This is Margarita, your favorite cocktail. Sure. And this is Paloma, and this is Evita, and this is Patrick, who's pulling my hair. And we're missing 2. They're at Catholic camp.
We're getting so many kids that they just kind of take care of themselves. So I guess we'll train the others to change diapers and do a bottle.
I like the Sean and Rachel Duffy thing, naming their kids, because it kind of does remind me of like naming giant litters of foster cats. We're running out of names. Let's just go with Game of Thrones characters. Now you have kids named Valor and Baylor and shit. Literally, I left a foster cat alone today and I was like, ooh. Having a big family is not the same thing as having a happy family. But don't tell that to Republicans. Elon Musk is so obsessed with having kids that he reportedly messages strangers on X and asks them to have babies for him. But he's a terrible father.
How many kids do you have now?
I have 12.
So what did you like about having kids?
Well, I think kids are delightful.
Why? What did you find delightful about them?
I mean, I think most people, vast majority of people are going to love their kids.
5 months ago, I welcomed a new baby into the world. Elon Musk is the father, says Ashley St. Clair. Elon, we have been trying to communicate for the past several days, she says, and you have not responded.
Grimes is publicly asking for Elon Musk's help. Please respond about our child's medical crisis.
He has famously rejected his trans daughter, even saying that she's dead. She denies being dead.
The reason it's called dead naming is because your son is dead. So my son Xavier is dead. Killed by the woke mind virus.
I had my little Threads response, and it went mega coconuts viral. I keep saying mega coconuts. I stole that from Natalie Wynn. I'm so sorry. Jordan Peterson, thank you for making me famous. I bet you didn't expect that turn of events, bitch. Fucking lobster bit. Stop trying to fuck the lobsters. They're not interesting.
Pretty good for a dead bitch. It must kill him that his daughter is so much funnier than he is. He's always like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Other MAGA leaders might not be so cavalier about having over a dozen children with 4 different women. But neglecting your kids and letting the mothers do all the work is normalized on the right.
I try to have as many of these rituals as possible that just remind the kids, I'm still your dad.
I was raising the kids and he was just going back and forth, and it was not easy because he had to be away so much. We never saw him. Our son never was able to see him.
And I'm in a job that's most of it's not kid friendly. So, there's most of the things the kids can't go to, and there's certain, and so we do what we can within it. So I do end up traveling alone a lot.
Mild neglect is better than the alternative. When MAGA dads do get involved in parenting, it's often weird or bad or even abusive.
Do I shop by myself? Mm-hmm. My daughter does it for me.
If they have a tantrum in a public place, I immediately grab them, take them to the bathroom and say, you gotta cut this shit out.
You're 14, you're 13, you're 15, need to represent yourself. You're meant to be seen and not heard. You're not the center of attention all the time.
In our family, we do not want to be thermometers, we want to be thermostats. What does that mean? Well, you don't go into a new environment and take the temp and adapt to it. No, because you stand for something. What we tolerate in moderation, our children excuse in excess.
We would demand that of the kids. I need them to not tell me when I ask them, how does school go? Nothing. And I know that's the answer that's convenient and easy to get away, but I do push our kids to answer. Like, what's really happening in your life? I'm not here as, an accoutrement. Your parents, your mom and I are the main course, so, come enjoy.
JD Vance doing the bathroom screaming fit. Unfortunately, that was like a thing I had to endure as a kid, but my dad at least did not say he was the main course. Mike Johnson's little excuse in moderation quote is so sinister. You see this a lot on the Christian right. They have these cutesy little sayings, but what they actually mean is scary. He was answering a question from Katie Miller about keeping your kids from being queer. First, you can't prevent that. Second, you shouldn't want to. But he's also implying that you have to police every little thing a kid does to prevent them from going on the wrong path. I saw this with so many conservative dads growing up in Texas. They would berate their boys for playing with Barbies or their girls for being tomboys. It's cruel, and it only leads to bitter feelings down the line. On Katie Miller's podcast, they avoid talking about exactly how these kids are being disciplined. But make no mistake, the right still believes in beating children.
And when Dad gets home, you know what he says? You've been a bad girl. You've been a bad little girl, and you're getting a vigorous spanking right now. And no, it's not going to hurt me more than it hurts you. No, it's not.
Did you ever fear that if you did something wrong, your mother would, quote, kill you?
My mom would beat the brakes off of me.
That's biblical.
How do you define biblical discipline versus abuse?
Okay, so biblical discipline, using a spanking spoon, or as we did. We sometimes joked about Nancy having a holster made.
That last man was Doug Wilson. He runs the church denomination that Pete Hegseth joined. I'll discuss this more and pass the mic with my guest, Steve Kennedy of the People's Parity Project. Wilson's attitudes about family are a lot like Mike Johnson's, all wrapped up in this extreme sexism. He's even suggested that women shouldn't have the right to vote. That's what this fetish for big families is ultimately about: gender. It's dudes bragging about how they know how to impregnate women. It's about trapping women in submission and dependence. When you always have one in you and one on you, it's hard to work outside the home. It's hard to leave a bad marriage. Dark stuff, which Republicans hide with this gauzy nostalgia. My grandmother used to say that she got pregnant every time Grandpa hung his belt on the bed knob. She was joking, but I know it wasn't easy for her. It's why her kids and her grandkids didn't have big families. These days, most people struggle to afford even one kid. The MAGA dad thing makes it worse. These men want a lot of children as little trophies to show off their virility to their friends and their donors. But kids are actually separate people. When children show that they have minds of their own, these men can't take it. It's why MAGA's ideology turns men into bad fathers. I'd like to welcome Steve Kennedy of the People's Parity Project to the program. Steve wrote an awesome article for the New Republic about an unfortunate situation in Texas where the state Supreme Court is looking at a law that could legalize child abuse. Welcome to Standing Room Only, Steve.
Hi, Amanda. Thanks so much for having me.
So let's start by talking about this article because it is very troubling, the details that you have in there about what this court case, if this Texas Supreme Court validates it, could allow. So could you just tell people about this court case and why you needed to write about it?
Yeah, so the case came up in the context of this Texas constitutional amendment that just passed in the last election that enshrined parental rights into the state constitution, which on the surface doesn't sound so bad, right? Like it's just about preventing government intrusion into the family. But, wait, aren't Texas Republicans actively invading the family right now when it comes to abortion, gender affirming care, things like that? So what's actually going on here? And what's actually happening is that the amendment was pushed mostly as a way of, putting forward book bans and parents having control over school curriculums. But even worse, like you mentioned, now it's being used to defend child abuse. Things like severe beatings, starvation. In this case, there were things just like hours of isolation and physical torture, basically, like, these wall sits for hours, like kneeling on grains of rice, things like that. And it's not just an isolated case of, some parent who lost their parental rights who's now latching onto this. Some of the same organizations that were pushing the amendment in the first place are now also filing amicus briefs in this case, pushing for this same expansive view of the amendment.
With that in mind, I want to show you a clip of Doug Wilson. He is a pastor out of Idaho who runs a church denomination that Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth actually famously belongs to. He was on a TPUSA talking about spanking and justifying spanking. And he gave a lot of reasons for why spanking should be allowed. And he's not just talking about like a hand on the butt. He's like beating with a strap, beating with a spoon.
Now, if a man is called to be tough, boys have to learn how to be tough. You're not going to be pampered for 21 years and then all of a sudden someone flips a switch and you magically know how to be tough. No, it doesn't work that way. So a boy has to get into scrapes. He has to fall off his bike, and his dad has to pick him up and comfort him for a couple of seconds and then say, now suck it up, right? You're not going to do that. You're not going to fall to pieces. No, not here. And people looking at that from the side say, oh, dad's being mean. No, dad is being really kind to his future daughter-in-law.
In this particular clip, he's not talking about spanking. He's talking about like not comforting a child who's hurt themselves. But he also says that you have to hit children in order to toughen them up, especially boys, that's how you turn them into men.
I mean, it's the kind of thing that you do see really commonly, like, among both just the broader parental rights kind of people, and particularly within, the religious right, like we're seeing here. Children need guidance, like how else are they going to learn? And sometimes it's like they can't understand a complicated explanation of why they can't do certain things. You can imagine certain situations where it's like, okay, this is actually dangerous. The kid's about to run to the road. It's fine to kind of grab them and pull it back or whatever. But that's not what he's talking about here, like you said. It's the kind of thing where it's like, it's actually like a system of corrective discipline that uses physical violence and like emotional violence as well to kind of take what they see as the natural tendency of children and people just left to their own devices to turn towards sin and that kind of thing. And that needs to be controlled. And again, that's something that you see reflected more broadly. Like with these people, you're doing a favor for the future daughter-in-law or whatever. It's like, no, you're creating another just like authoritarian figure in the household who will use physical punishment to impose as well.
I think we think a lot of the time about how these sexist models hurt girls and women, but you're not doing boys any favors when you tell them that they can't cry, that they have to be tough, that's what manhood is about. And I think it's really important that this man runs Pete Hegseth's church.
Yeah, I mean, I could talk about Pete Hegseth all goddamn day. Like, so like I'm an Iraq veteran myself. And like, I don't know, there are things that like we even share like on the surface, so like I don't have 7 kids or whatever he has, but like, like I have a larger family than average. I have 4 kids. We homeschool them. I mean, it's in like a whole progressive co-op and stuff. So it's like completely different in that way. But like, basically like to me, it's like I see someone who like started with some similar things and just like took all of the wrong lessons from them. And that's something that like really drives me crazy with the military in particular, because his whole thing there is the optics, like being the cool guy, shooting guns and whatever. And there's no like learning or growth that came from that experience. And like, that's something that for those of us who, went through that, there is a lot there, and it's complicated. It's not just like, again, suck it up, be a man, whatever. It's like, it's just a ridiculous way of seeing things. And when you think of how, somebody who is following that same kind of parenting advice and, fair chance, like received the same kind of parenting, it makes me, when I see people like that, it makes me worried for their kids. If you look at other times that Doug Wilson has spoken about disciplining children, and he may have even mentioned it in this same interview. He calls it internalizing the principle, which basically is that through this physical violence to correct children's behavior, they internalize that, and it makes them better people or something. But really, what he's describing there is shame.
Yeah.
So fear is part of what makes the child behave the way that parents want. But ultimately, what happens is that beyond the fear, they internalize the idea that they are bad and they need to be punished. And he says it explicitly, that they internalize that principle. And that kind of internalized response to outside judgment is like the textbook definition of shame. So like that response to physical harm from somebody that they should have been able to trust, just regardless of the severity of the assault or anything like that, which is what corporal punishment is. It's assault. Like it really doesn't matter how severe it is or anything like that. What he's describing, like taking advantage of your position of power to force a child to, pull down their pants so you can spank and shame them, is intentional malicious abuse of a child.
I've got another clip for you from Sean Duffy, who's the transportation secretary. He has 9 children, and I think he kind of holds that out as his primary quality and reason that he should be a cabinet secretary. And during his confirmation hearing, that's literally kind of all they talked about was how many kids he has, how hard it must be, but also reinforce the idea that somehow, while it's hard, it's still also just women's work.
As a father of 6, I'm even more impressed by what's on display today. I don't think I could take my 6 kids anywhere and have them sit anywhere for over an hour, as well as these kids have. And I'm willing to give the bulk of the credit to your wife, but no doubt you had something to do with these kids. All of that said, I did note in your remarks you read their names as you were introducing them.
Senator, I do know their names, but I was fearful that I could be so stressed out I didn't want to forget them.
You have 4 kids. Like, I mean, if you doubled it or more, do you think you would forget their names?
I mean, I certainly hope not. But, I guess if I could, that would qualify me to be transportation secretary, right?
One of the things that I was struck by is like they hold out big families is inherently good, but it is about having this big but very obedient brood of children. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's definitely a part of it. And it is there's this weird like tension there, right? Because it's like, as you said, at the same time as they're like, oh, I have so many kids and they'll just sit here and whatever. When you know that they're not the ones actually making that happen, like some of these kids probably barely even know their dads. The one who's actually like making that happen is the mom. But like that on its own really is almost a part of it. It's that this man not only has these obedient children, regardless of how they made that happen or, their spouse made that happen, they also have this, amazing wife who's, mother to their kids and raising these little, polite children who can sit in a room for this long and that kind of thing. It also kind of goes into Trump's obsession with like his allegedly great genes and that kind of thing, where, they're passing on their genes. And they have so many little, Duffys running around or whatever. And in that way, it kind of makes sense because that's the only way that some of these guys even interact with their kids. Like their genes are about all they're going to give them aside from like daddy issues. So, there are plenty of men that would have a lot of kids but they actually want to be engaged in their lives and actually raise them. And our society just isn't built for that unless you are rich, whether you're a man or a woman, to have the kind of full life that you want while also having a large family.
Yeah, and the next clip I want to show you actually gets to that. So it's from when Charlie Kirk was still alive, and he had a woman ask him a question about having a big family, and they make it seem like the only obstacle to having a big family is that people are kind of mean about it. So let me play that clip for you.
I want to have a big family, and the overwhelming response that I get when I tell people that I want to have 5, 6, maybe 7 kids, is like so negative. I want to understand how we can help change this stigma against people wanting to have bigger families, because I think it's better for the country, like you say.
Self-love, by the way, is one of the most dangerous things happening in America. When you have children, though, you realize it's not all about you. You get up at 2 a.m. because you have to serve something else. You have to serve another human being that is not you. Having children is more about duty and obligation, not about narcissism and pleasure. And we must talk about in society what one ought to do, not what one wants to do. God wired into you a biological urge and a need to reproduce and to raise children. And so we should celebrate big families. In fact, I think it would be awesome for the looming fertility crisis if everyone here had 7 children. I think that would be amazing.
I have to say, I think for the men that are into this like big brood, it is actually about narcissism, ego, and showing off how many kids they can make. But anyway, I mean, on a more serious point, like the notion that the issue is that people are just too selfish to want big families, that they're too lazy, that they're just too self-centered. Thoughts?
Yeah. I like the whole, like right-wing idea that there is some kind of bias against large families. It's like the war on Christmas, right? It's just not a thing. Like nobody is looking at some giant family and being just like, oh, like, I wish I could do that, but I'm too like narcissistic, or just like, those people are weird. I mean, they are weird, but like, not just because you have a ton of kids, it's because to have a ton of kids, you have to do it in a certain way that like most people would not agree with. Like I could never have the same kind of close relationships that I do have with my kids if there were like 10 of them,
We could go on about this forever, Steve, but I want to end by asking you to tell people where they can find you, where they can find your work. Go ahead, hype yourself.
Yeah, no, definitely. So, for like my primary work, like you said, I'm an organizing director at the People's Parity Project, where we're working towards shifting the legal system to actually work for people as opposed to corporations. So you can check that out at peoplesparity.org. I also write, about law and politics, in the New Republic, in Slate, in Balls and Strikes, places like that. So yeah, you can find me there.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being on Standing Room Only.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you all for watching. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. And please stick around for Encore. The song recommendation this week is a great one. You've heard the song before, but maybe not in this way. Hey folks, coming to you from my house in Philadelphia. This is my home record collection. Mixing it up a little, showing that I do listen to records at home as well as at Latchkey Records. And the song pick of the week is Nothing Compares to You, written by Prince, but performed by The Family. So obviously you guys have heard Nothing Compares to You, the Sinead O'Connor version, which is the best version of the song. Anybody who disagrees is just wrong, wrong, wrong. Even Prince got so insanely jealous of Sinead doing the best version of the song that he unfortunately got into an ugly fight with her and frightened her. He had a terrible temper, but we won't dwell on that. I want to talk about the more fun aspect, which is who he originally wrote the song for and who originally performed it. So The Family is a Minneapolis band. They were popular around the same time that Prince and the Revolution and The Time and everybody else in that scene was. And the lead singer of The Family is a woman named Susanna Melvoin. She is the twin sister of Wendy Melvoin, who is the guitarist of The Revolution. They are identical twins. Wendy is a lesbian. She was partnered with Lisa. They still do music together. I don't think they're together romantically anymore, but they were at the time of The Revolution. Spoiler alert, Susanna Melvoin was also Prince's girlfriend at the time. He fell in love with a woman that looks identical to his lesbian guitarist. So we'll just let the psychology, the majors in the audience deal with that one. They had a tumultuous relationship, and he did write Nothing Compares to You for Susanna to sing with her band, The Family. And I found a copy of this in Austin, Texas, and was squealing really loudly because I am fascinated with cover songs and the various versions of different songs. I don't think you can actually find the original version of Nothing Compares to You on streaming, so vinyl is kind of where it's at. It's pretty good. I mean, obviously the Sinead O'Connor version is better, but it's cool to have it. And that's part of the fun of record collecting. So yeah, Nothing Compares to You by The Family, written by Prince, perfected by Sinead O'Connor. If you want more Standing Room Only episodes, please click the subscribe button below. Standing Room Only started as a newsletter, and it's free to read. Click the link to subscribe. I love tips. These political battles are playing out in your communities, your towns, your neighborhoods, your schools. If you have a story, please drop me a line or leave it in comments.